Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
Newsfirst, NewsLine with Faraz Shawkatali.
And it's a wonderful morning. Jolly good morning to you. This is Newsline, live as always from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And of course we do broadcast on TV1, who've just celebrated their 2nd anniversary. Isn't that wonderful? And that's all the more reason that it's a wonderful morning. We are also joined this morning by a lady, a doctor, who's specialized in the rights of children. And in the context of the legislation to encourage female participation at elections in a governance level, we thought it'd be appropriate to discuss with Dr. Hiranthi Wijeymanne the impact it may have on social life. Very good morning, Dr. Wijeymanne.
Good morning, Faraz.
And thank you so much for coming on our program. No stranger, of course, you've been here several times. And today you're on double duty because you've accommodated Mr. Bandhu Jayasek on Pathika.
That's right. He hit 2 stones, one stone with
yes.
2 targets. Okay.
Well, now then, Dr. Wijeymanne, good news, is it not, that by law, now a certain percentage, 25%, has been reserved for female participation.
That is extremely good news for us, because for years and years we have been lagging behind even the South Asian countries, let alone Western countries and developed countries. We have been lagging behind in terms of female representation in Parliament. And certainly one way of doing it, which has been tried in many countries including Pakistan and India, is to have a quota system. In fact, the United Nations did it. When I first joined the United Nations, there were very much more men and very few women. So what they did was they had a quota system, and also when there were 2 very similar candidates, they chose the woman. That's how they increased the number of women in the UN.
Right.
So this is a global thing, and I mean, it was very, very sad that Sri Lanka was lagging behind, because we keep saying female literacy is high, tertiary education, both law college, medical college, all the universities have a very, very high percentage of women. They are equal in education, and we keep talking about these things, but they are not represented in Parliament. So, and also in other legislative bodies. Actually, the target should be that in any kind of policy making body, decision making body, that you have equal representation of men and women.
Now, yes, that's on the one side. Now, when we were at school, I'm sure the rest of them too, when we came back home, there was this rock always. Mother was at home. So, you know, mother was the one organizing the sandwiches, the drinks, all these various sporting activities, and created sporting activities as well, because we wanted to get off, you know, without telling her. But what I'm trying to say is the mother was always at home. So now, if we look at the situation now, these children will come home to an empty home because mother will be politicking. What effect is that going to have?
No, I have a different view about this. It's not only in politics for us, it's in any kind of occupation. Women are working, there are women doctors, there are women lawyers, there are accountants.
How did you manage? Because you're a doctor yourself, you worked.
I think, a lot, of course, depends on the person you marry. I mean, the father, because...
But your husband is a doctor too.
He is also a doctor too. So, I guess he was quite, he never raised any objections to in fact, he encouraged me to do even have postgraduate qualification. I think it's a question of the man and the woman joining together and organizing the family in a way that both can work. Right. It's a question of how you organize your life. Of course, here we have extended family, and certainly my mother did a a lot to support my children. So there is extended family, and I of course believe, I don't know whether it's just because of my personal experience, but I do believe when women work, they do feel very fulfilled. They contribute to the family coffer. They are able to mix around with other people, and they can also bring a lot of richness into the relationship because they are working together with their husband to build up the family. It's a question of organizing the family life. Certainly in Western countries, perhaps there are more support services like more child care where you could keep the child. Here we have the extended family. Well, grandmothers, I think, in villages and in towns help a lot.
Indeed.
And they support. You need a mother figure. I mean, it doesn't have to be your biological mother. It might be an aunt, it might be your grandmother. The main thing is the family juggles around, and I know numerous working women, I meet them all the time, professional women who have done a splendid job, not only in their work, but also have brought up children.
Now then, whilst you go about your, I mean, you're sort of retired, are you, now? But, you know, as you go along your daily work and so on, and your various involvements and whatever, how aware are you of what's going on in our country in terms of, you know, let's talk about the corruption issues, the good governance issues. Is it like a elusive mosquito that you can't get hold of, you know, even though you try? Yeah, or is it? Are you? How aware are you?
Well, my biggest sources of really good, accurate information are three-wheeler drivers and kadakaryas. They are extremely good because they are naive. They tell you the truth. They express their opinion without any, any other consideration. And in a way, it's a good barometer to know what's going on. And of course, certainly the Sinhala newspapers, local newspapers in the local languages, which are read by all these people, certainly reflect a lot of the views. What is to me, which I think I mentioned in my previous interview also, is really in this election and what's going on in the political framework of this country, the saddest for me is that the most vulnerable, the most deserving, the future of this country, the children. Secondly, the women who need to have equal status with their men, who keep the home fires burning, who bear the child. For 9 months, you're pregnant, you bear this child. And who go through all those kinds of situations are given, and women's rights, even this 30% was, with great difficulty, this, 25% now they are saying anyway, representation has been decided, are still not accorded the priority and the place that is due to them in our society. We keep saying that women are literate, they have equal access to education, they have equal access to higher education, but that's it. The women are not given that priority, and that is to me very sad. And of course there are other issues like, for example, domestic violence, which we haven't addressed properly. There's sexual harassment going on both in the public and the private sector, which is not addressed properly. And
is it not addressed properly because our culture doesn't allow us to do it? Our culture is sort of not to talk about these things openly, but to...
No, two things. One is not to talk about it, and number two is that men don't want to admit it or address it because they feel it's a reflection on this so-called masculinity model. You know, a lot of Eastern countries have a what is called a identity, a masculine identity, which is being aggressive. That is not a model which the current modern world condones or supports.
Talking about masculine, what did you say?
Aggressive
right. Now then, talking about masculine aggressiveness.
Yes.
how would you feel? Okay, your children are all grown up and so on, so your grandmother.
Okay.
But okay, look at your grandchildren. How did you feel? What kind of message do your grandchildren receive when they see our parliamentarians at work fighting each other in Parliament? You know, well, I asked somebody, a youth, what did you make of that? He said, oh, they all like that, so that's nothing.
No, Faraz, that was, I must say, one of the saddest days, I think, in the history of this country, because that laid bare, I mean, it exposed the quality of the parliamentarians whom we have. I'm sorry to make such a bold statement, but I have to do that. I'm sad to say that this is the Sri Lankan Parliament, because we were all proud that we had a parliamentary system of politics, we had democracy.
Yeah.
But to see these people whom we have put into position, I think that particular day when this demonstration took place, I think some 4.5 million
That's
rupees.
how much it cost, 4.5 million rupees.
Yes.
Per sitting.
Of
That's
our
how much
money,
it cost. Our money.
Of our money, went into that session, and there was this spectacle which was like any alcohol bar somewhere where there's a huge bunch of guys fighting each other, or some kind of
It reminded me of scenes from a Victorian age in some rowdy saloon bar.
Yeah. Basically, it was a total breakdown of control. I mean, we as adults, all of us, we have some control systems. I mean, we have certain control systems, and these control systems are stronger when we are in groups, when we are at meetings, and Parliament, which is at the highest level of making legislature for this country. For that to have happened, I think indeed it was a day of great sorrow for many Sri Lankans.
But it made it even more unpalatable when this appeared to have been led by the person who also holds the title of Prime Minister. And he was like the principal cheerleader there that day, posing this question, telling me the cameras and the mics picked him up, saying, when I shout, you shout back. When I shout, you shout back. And then all this business about Kaudapura and all that. 40 years, I believe, unbroken, as a member of Parliament.
Well, I think there was a breakdown of controls. Quite a lot of people, for whatever reason, their control systems just broke down.
And what about the control, Dr. Wijeymanne, when you see all this happening and all this money? Our country, quite often say, oh, we haven't got the money, we haven't got the money, we haven't got the money. But then you tune in and you look at all the corruption going on. Billions, right? And all a complete departure from process. That's the issue here. A complete departure from process.
No, this is the point for us, is money, because I know since I have been in the Committee on the Rights of the Child, I have been in the National Committee. In fact, when the convention was being ratified, our former minister was the foreign minister, and I know personally I also worked with the foreign ministry to get that convention ratified. And one of the issues in the convention is to ensure that there is adequate resources for children, for child rights, for children's issues.
Yeah.
So I have also seen, traveling the length and breadth of this country, children incarcerated for stealing half a loaf of bread. I have seen children incarcerated for all kinds of other petty thefts. I have seen children whose parents are unable to give them meals.
Yeah, but
So when you see, when you know that this is a country where there are these kinds of financial situations, and then you also see on the other hand people behaving in this totally unruly manner, so-called leaders whose, to be honest, salaries and emoluments, is it called, or whatever they get as extras, the vehicles, the drivers, the petrol.
That's the point I'm trying to say here. Now we had President and Mrs. Rajapaksa, 3 children. Now, we all know that he's a politician. He's years in the business, okay? And Mrs. Rajapaksa has been the mother. But don't you think that they would have opened their eyes a little bit and asked them, where did you get that car from? Where did you get that watch from? Because obviously these people collected all sorts of gifts from various people who were obviously trying to cut a deal, curry favor, call it what you may, but that was the bottom line. And they must have surely if my son turned up in some smart car, I'm going to want to know how he paid for it, or indeed if it's his. And these people didn't seem to do that. And they had all sorts of things that were not keeping in line with President Rajapaksa's earnings.
No,
I'm using President Rajapaksa as an example because it's the most recent thing that's here.
No, basically for us, for some reason, and I do not know what the reason is, and maybe we'll never know the reason, from what I have seen of the behavior and the functioning of current politicians, this thing that we all have called conscience.
Yeah.
We all have a conscience. I worked for UNICEF. There were things I just didn't do when I was working. There were things I could have done, but I didn't do those things. Someone works as a teacher. There are things that they don't do as a teacher. You know what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it appears, I don't know, it is based on media. I mean, I don't meet many politicians and I don't hobnob with them. When a person becomes a politician, whether it seems to be cut across being an MP in Parliament, it cuts across when they join a Pradesh.
What happens to their conscience when they get elected?
Maybe the conscience atrophies for some reason. I don't know. That thing called conscience, where you don't say certain things, you don't do certain things.
And you don't see certain things.
And you see, yes. So there is some change which takes place. Well, there was just a few honest, decent politicians I have worked with in my life. One of them was Mr. Gamini Jayasuriya, whom I worked very closely with, and in fact we went to some of the conflict-affected areas, Padavia, Anuradhapura, Kaptigolla, all these places we visited, Valioya, and he was one person I know who was, we could call an honest politician who really felt for the people. But these kinds of people seem to be far and few between, and perhaps are becoming an extinct species. I don't know.
The Zavir who says that it is the Kadakares and so on who've been easily misled by politicians and who've helped to vote the rogues in. And once they're in, then they start complaining. But the problem is, once they're in, we all have to complain. And so, isn't there a case that whilst democracy is necessary and so on, that the level of education to understand the ramifications, where this culture of, oh, you can get their vote by giving them a bottle and some bit of entertainment, and you on the last day, and then they'll give you their vote.
No, this issue of, in fact, I must say, Mr. Jayasuriya, whom I knew was a very honest politician. In fact, even in the 80s, I did make that comment to him. I said, sir, why don't you, lead a party which stands for honesty, decency, etc., etc. And he made somewhat of gave me an unusual reply. He said, you know, there are people who like to give something and get something in return.
Right.
So he said, if I come forward, I will tell every person who worked for me that even if you worked for me or gave me money for my campaign, do not expect a favor. In which case he said, no one will come forward. This is what he said, and it was very sad to think that that is a quality in our people, but I don't believe that is so with everyone. I don't believe that. I think you cannot blame the people. The person who's put into a position, we are appointed into certain positions when we work. It is expected of us that we follow a certain vinaya, a certain kind of system. We have certain integrity. I mean, I know people who have been dismissed for stealing some small office item.
Well, if you remember the case of a governor of the central bank in the past, he made a telephone call to the bank, to the branch manager where his wife had an account, and I think asked him to accommodate. He didn't order him, but he asked him because his wife wanted an overdraft or something of the sort. He had to resign. That was the end of him. Here we had thousands of telephone calls, all in the pursuit of ostensibly raising ₹1 billion, and this whole thing's gone haywire, right? And when the media has come across these. Let's take the Central Highway, the Central Expressway, and when we said, look, the departure of process, you didn't follow the rules. Why have you departed from national procurement guidelines? And the response to that was, look, I've got 400 million in the bank account. Our families have had 30,000 acres. We don't need to gut deals. All right, fine. How about publishing your asset and liabilities declaration? How about showing us all the taxes you've paid in the last several years? It's not chicken feed, is it? 400 million, you know. So as of now, I spoke to our legal people yesterday. We haven't got that asset and liabilities declaration yet. We are batting on. So that's what I mean. This flippancy.
No, Faraz, I think you see the issue here is, bad practices have been established in this country now for several years. Each succeeding government has been breaking the rules and accepting, this kind of behavior, and now it's sort of become part of a culture. When a bad practice is allowed to continue,
right.
I mean, if we allow people to steal, for example,
yeah.
If the Katakara says, yes, that fellow stole 2 loaves of bread, that's okay. Then that fellow next time, another fellow will also come and steal 2 loaves of bread.
Your Katakare,
yes.
Could you ask next time you see him what he would feel if somebody came along and stole some of his stock for which he's paid? I'm sure he won't be very happy.
He will not only not be happy, but he will report it and he will make sure that that person is punished.
Yes, but in this case, in the way these people are talking about it, they've robbed the central bank. We've got 2 Supreme Court judges and a retired Deputy Auditor General who've gone through the commission and all that business. And now they say, well, we'll return the loss, the immediate loss, 9.2 billion. We'll return that. Hello, what about all the money they made out of this fraud to start with? There's at least 10 billion left over, even if you paid the 9.2. And then one chap, the main culprit, if you like, is out of the country. And we will never, probably never, see him being brought to justice.
I suppose for us it's impunity, and the leaders, whoever the leaders are who are involved, have to bear responsibility. But unfortunately, responsibility to govern, when that power is given to you, does not seem to be exercised the way it should. We are paying, as you say, we are paying people's salaries, we are paying for their vehicles, we are paying for overseas trips, we are paying for, you know, all this is from the national coffers. It's not personal money. And you expect a certain quality of leadership, you anticipate honesty, decency, but why that is not there, I do not know. I don't have an answer for that.
I'm going to ask you a question that has been posed to me by a viewer from Kandy, and that is this. Whilst the media are highlighting these misdemeanors and corruption and so on of public figures, shouldn't we also advocate that these rascals be ostracized from our society? I'll tell you what I mean. If you bump into one of these rascals in one of these hotels or in some event, everybody's smiling, saying, oh, hello, you know, and all that business. I think we should go up and say, excuse me, when you're returning that money, when are you going to present yourself in court? When are you going to admit this? And, you know, you don't belong here, because you've stuffed all of us. Don't you think that's the culture we should be trying to promote?
That's not a bad idea. I think that's a good idea, because I think, you know, this complacency that we all have, we know these people...
Yes, this sort of resignation.
That's right. We have a sense of resignation. Unfortunately, we have it's not complacency, but this laissez-faire approach of, you know, it might get sorted out, but we don't really, we are not really proactive.
There are still people who think that this entire business, this sorry business of the Bondgate, for example, that it's all made up by the media. Complete nonsense. I mean, then we must be very powerful indeed, because we had two Supreme Court judges, sitting judges, both sent out this report. And what were these people doing? What were the elders in the family? Let's take the young man who was heading this primary dealership, Arjun Aloysius. What on earth were the elders in his family doing instead of guiding him in the right path? Obviously he's got talent, but how about having got him to focus that talent on anything other than all this business that's happened? It's impossible to believe that this young man did it all on his own.
Well, for us, unfortunately, you know, honesty, decency, patriotism, doing the job well, particularly if it's your country, love of country, maintaining standards. It's not about fast cars and big hotels and all this, you know, show that goes on, the glamour. It's just those kinds of qualities which really make you a decent human being. Those somehow are not given much priority in our country. It's those other superficialities that seem to be coming in, and it's a bit frightening, because our value system is getting eroded, and I think it's something which we need to deal with in the future. As I told you, I've come across so many young fellows who stole a loaf of bread because they were hungry, and they're put into an institution for 1 year and they lose contact with their parents. This kind of thing is happening. And then you see millions and billions being spirited away, and those people walking around. It's hard to accept, actually. It is very hard and very depressing. But I don't know, maybe in the future there might be some decent, honest leaders. We can only hope for that.
I'm glad, because I was thinking in my mind on how to end the program, and I was going to say let's have hope, but you've taken the words right out of my mouth. So, Dr. Hiranthi Wijeymanne, thank you very much for being on Newsline, and let's hope for the best. Let's hope that the Pressifact report, which names several names and recommends the prosecution of various people, including Basil Rajapaksa, Mahinda Rajapaksa, and several others, and the former Chief Minister S.M. Ranjit and so on. Let's hope that all of these commissions don't go to waste, that this work, hard work conducted by professional members of the judiciary and so on, will not just end up in some table collecting dust. Let's hope for action, action, action. Let's hope for recovery, but let's also hope for accountability and for responsibility to take place. On that note, that's the way it was on Newsline this morning. Take care. God bless.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.